Let's go through a case study and Grant, maybe walk us through this scenario. Whenever I think of server and server coming up for replacement, I think of lifecycle management. Our servers are coming up, our laptops, our machines. Here's who's using what. If you guys are monitoring like you do, you'll know when that stuff is coming up. This just happens to be a server that's running, Autodesk.
Yep.
Maybe walk us through kind of this scenario and what happened and kind of what you
Yeah.
guys did.
Yeah. So basically, every 7 years, the vendors say the server, the hardware needs to be replaced, or Microsoft saying the operating system needs to be replaced. And sometimes they're in conjunction, sometimes they're not. But ultimately, you're looking at doing some form of migration, whether it's to a new server or if it's to a cloud. And honestly, nowadays I'm hard pressed to recommend a server unless there is a specific application that needs to reside there. Some accounting platforms still need to have a home in the office, but most cases, if you're small, if you're under 100 people, I mean, even maybe 50, having a server in place, the technology's moved to the cloud, and so there's no reason to have it. Um, like I said, not to mention, like I said earlier, you're staring down the barrel of a 15, maybe 20K to replace that server. And what kind of benefit is it giving you? It's just, it's allowing you to do business, but you're not getting any strategic value out of it. So if you're looking at the reason to spend that type of money, you might as well get up to the next latest and greatest. You want to get that extra functionality that the cloud will bring, that actually brings real tools back to your office that will help advance your business. So this case, I mean, like, it's a CapEx versus OpEx. So if you move to the cloud, you're paying a monthly subscription, in most cases, or you might have an annual subscription that's billed out monthly, or you might have a one-time annual, based subscription versus that one lump sum upfront. But ultimately, by moving to the cloud, you're solving a lot of these problems that exist with having that server in a closet. One of them is being business continuity. So you think about business continuity, like what happens, during theft, fire, natural disaster. You got that box in a closet, and so how does everybody get connected? How is that going to impact your business? And so if you have a cloud first mentality, if something goes wrong, you send your staff home, everybody's working from home, and you don't miss a beat. And ultimately, I get to ask the question of, like, well, what happens if Microsoft or Autodesk goes down? And I answer, we have bigger problems. But
Right.
so
Yeah.
yeah, business continuity being one of them. Like I said, solving the VPN connectivity problems, money related issues.
Yeah.
They all go away.
Grant, also, one of the things too that we see is there's a lot of overhead to have a server in your office. So you have the backup solution, which there's a cost to that. You're now having to have professional IT support to manage the server and the backup solution. So there's a monthly cost for that. There's network infrastructure like switches and cabling and all of that go along with it. So when you can get rid of the server when it's not needed, you can really streamline things. And it's not just like that one-time cost. There's a lot of monthly costs available with it too.
I think it used to be like a control thing, like, oh, I know where it is.
I know where my data is.
I can
Yeah.
go touch the box if I need. I mean, people didn't do
Yeah.
that, but and maybe this goes back to your point, Andrew, about folks early on who adopted this technology that worked, and now there's this new level of technology that lets you be. I mean, the remote thing alone. Of course, I've been working, remotely for 20 years, so I'm used to it. And you guys are used to working in and out of your clients' offices remotely for the most part. I mean, you guys do pay visits, obviously, but it just seems like there also maybe was a thought of, oh, we got to spend a bunch of money in December to save on taxes, kind of thing. That whole philosophy around management of technology has existed for a while. So this is just, leveling up on all that stuff. When we went through this next example, you actually this is the example of, hey, they already migrated to the cloud, but weren't very successful. So Grant, talk us
Yeah.
through this example.
So all cloud environments are not created equal. They have different functions based on the vendor, and so each vendor is really focused on their own technologies. But the business has many different file types that are used to run their businesses, and not all of them come from one vendor. In fact, in most cases, you're going to have potentially 5, 6. And I think in our case, we have like 30 plus. So everybody's kind of got their own set of tools. And so to think that one cloud environment rules them all, it just doesn't make sense, right? Microsoft doesn't care about CAD, and CAD doesn't care about Microsoft. That the functionality is just not the same. And so there's actually impacts, straight business impacts, when you go to the wrong cloud, because there might be something that is an actual showstopper that actually truly impacts your business financially and from a productivity standpoint. And so in speaking of like SharePoint, specifically, having CAD CAD is kind of a problem. You get into 3D rendering type software, and it's a really big problem. You just have collisions constantly that are happening. People are stepping over each other, synchronization issues. It's just not designed to be there. So yeah, you have to choose your path wisely.
And remind us common folk, what's a collision?
A collision is when you have two people in the same file at the same time, and then they try to save on top of each other. And since the system doesn't know which one is actually the true file, it creates a collision or creates another file. And so the work didn't get saved to the right file. And so now the person has to be able to take that work and try to put it back into the original file. So you're essentially doing the work twice.
Oh, wow.
because of a technical problem. Most people are said, there's not that many people in the file at the same time. The answer is we see it all the time. You got to be in the right platform to be able to lock the file. So if you do try to open a file that somebody's in, whether they knew it or not, at least it tells you and says, this person's in the file. It's read only, you can't access it. And there's a few technologies out there that allow that to happen, but there's only a few sets of files that actually lock when users get into it. So like Word, Excel lock automatically in the right environments, like SharePoint. AutoCAD files require a lock. Revit files, Civil 3D, all these things require locking, so you don't have these types of issues. But some clouds don't honor that locking mechanism.
Oh, interesting. Could be I imagine this was like a bowl of spaghetti, and you're like grabbing each of the ones out at a time to try to separate what's going on.
Yeah.
What are you going to say?
We have been separating a lot of spaghetti. There's been a lot of spaghetti separating lately. So what Grant, like the flip side of what Grant's talking about is, and this is what we're really seeing, is these vendors are building functions in their cloud environments that enhance their programs. So like in the case of Microsoft's SharePoint system, Microsoft has built functions so that Word, Excel, PowerPoint, that multiple people can be in those files at the same time, and there are no collisions. You move that Word, Excel, or PowerPoint file to a different system, and it starts to have collisions. And CAD's the same way, right? Or Autodesk, they build their environments so that their Revit system, which is usually multiple people on the same file, they can do their functionality in the BIM 360 system. But if you take that same file and put it in SharePoint, it becomes problematic. And so we're really seeing this silos. Oh, there you go. A nice segue there. The siloing of these different systems. And, there is unfortunately, this is kind of a middle ground. We are seeing some emerging trends for third-party vendors to orchestrate all kinds of different files. And Grant will chat about that here in a little second, but let's talk about data silos. So Grant, if you want to run with that, or Tony.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I
So
was just saying before, I've always been taught silos is like a bad word because everything's separate. You know, you don't want everything separate.
yeah,
But that might be more on like data management. But when you guys talk about this, Grant, I kind of
yeah,
interrupted you there,
so
but
no, I think that your thought is correct. I mean, data siloing makes things difficult, right? And so when you go to a vendor specific cloud, there's going to be some siloing that happens because you're looking for that functionality. So Autodesk Docs, there's a completely different set of functions here than there are down here in SharePoint. And so I can open a file, a CAD file from here, and it will lock. I can't, or a Revit file, and I'll get full functionality. If that file existed down below here, I'm going to have problems. And so the issue is that how do you solve that silo problem? How do you get data where it's in basically in one spot? And that's the trick, right? Of how do we get it to where you get the functionality and you get the data in the same spot? I'm not going to give anybody the names of how we're going to do that. You got to call me for those.
but that's
But
part of understanding who needs what files for why. You know, maybe there's some roles that need files in each platform. Maybe
yes,
some that don't. I don't
well,
I mean,
so this is where the business process comes in, right? So in some cases, this might work perfectly fine. Where you have your project files here and your business files down here in SharePoint. Sorry, I'm moving my mouse around like you guys can see it. I apologize. So Autodesk, you keep your project files in Autodesk, and that's all that exists there, right? And then you keep your business related documents in SharePoint. But in some cases, that's not acceptable, right? People are looking to have both business related documents, PDF, Word, Excel, and your product that you're producing in the same folder inside your project because that is your product. And so that's the question of, can I get around a change of business process where it lives in two locations, and I do some sort of little level of data management where I'm done working on a project and I move it all down into my business documents, or vice versa. So when you're archiving that file, you're not really in it anymore. So it doesn't really matter where it lives anymore because you don't care about the functionality. And so is it worth the additional process to go through that? Or is there a better solution?
well, I can tell you from firsthand experience, and you guys we've worked together long enough where having someone and Andrew always says this, like, okay, who's the grown up in the room, right? Having a grown up in the room that understands the organization and the business processes so that you can develop the discipline to put the files where they need to go because that makes everything work well, the business process. Um, you know, I would have a gazillion files all over the place, right? It's like, oh no, this is how we organize. This is what we do. This is why we do it. And communicating about that is a real value. So I get what you guys are after. And it just takes communication about it and the organization to do it. But that also talks about like, okay, pre-engineering. What are we doing to get ready for all of this?
Well,
And this is where
sorry, on that last, I was going to point out, like, yet even if you go back real quick, even another, so I've got Adobe Creative Cloud here, yet another data silo. So if you have some design work that happens, you might have, marketing slicks that you put out or presentations that are done outside of an Autodesk environment. So yet you've got a third data silo now where the data doesn't sit where it's supposed to. So there's got to be there's a better solution, right, than potentially having it all put together. But how do you get it all to work in conjunction where it doesn't impact your business?
Yeah.